Picture a young boy from a wealthy Italian family sent to the prestigious Benedictine monastery of Monte Cassino at just 5 years old. This is Thomas Aquinas in 1230, not yet the towering intellect who would forever change the relationship between faith and reason. Born in 1225 in the castle of Roccaseca near Naples, into a noble family connected to the Holy Roman Emperor, young Thomas seemed destined for power and prestige within the church hierarchy. His parents envisioned him becoming an influential abbot, a path guaranteeing status and comfort. But something extraordinary stirred within this quiet, contemplative child that would eventually challenge the intellectual foundations of medieval Europe. Thomas, nicknamed the Dumb Ox by fellow students for his large frame and reserved nature, possessed an inner fire that would illuminate the darkest philosophical questions of his age. While his contemporaries saw only his silent demeanor and imposing physique, his teacher, Albert the Great, recognized the brilliance beneath, famously declaring, "You call him the dumb ox, but in his teaching, he will one day produce such a bellowing that it will be heard throughout the world." By age 20, Thomas had already defied his family's carefully laid plans. Rather than joining the prestigious Benedictine order as his parents intended, he chose the newly formed Dominican order, mendicant friars who embraced poverty and dedicated themselves to preaching and learning. This choice so outraged his family that they had him kidnapped and imprisoned in their castle for nearly a year, even sending a courtesan to his room to tempt him from his vocation. But Thomas remained resolute, eventually escaping through a window with help from his sisters. This early conflict reveals something essential about Thomas's character: a relentless pursuit of what he believed to be true, regardless of social pressure or personal cost. While he never sought controversy, he wouldn't avoid it when the search for truth demanded courage. This combination of brilliant intellect and moral fortitude would enable him to construct one of the most comprehensive philosophical systems in human history, one that still shapes our understanding of reality, knowledge, and human nature today. What makes Thomas unique among philosophers is his remarkable synthesis of seemingly opposing traditions. While many contemporaries viewed ancient Greek philosophy with suspicion, particularly the recently rediscovered works of Aristotle, Thomas recognized profound truth wherever he found it. He demonstrated how rational insights of pagan philosophers could harmonize with Christian revelation without compromising either. Through monumental works like the Summa Theologica and Summa Contra Gentiles, he created a philosophical cathedral so vast and intricate that scholars still discover new insights within it 8 centuries later. His ideas remain astonishingly relevant today. In our age of fragmented knowledge and specialized expertise, Thomas offers a vision of unified wisdom that integrates rather than divides. In our era of polarized discourse, he demonstrates how to engage opposing viewpoints with both intellectual rigor and genuine respect. In our time of rapid technological change and moral uncertainty, he provides enduring principles for understanding the human person and ethical decision-making. Part 1. The Foundation of Reality, Being in Existence. To understand Thomas Aquinas, we must begin where he begins, with the fundamental nature of reality itself. Imagine looking at an ordinary object, perhaps a wooden chair in your room. What makes this collection of wood, nails, and varnish a chair rather than random materials? What gives it its chairness? And perhaps more fundamentally, what makes it exist at all rather than not exist? These seemingly simple questions launch us into the heart of Thomas's metaphysics, his understanding of the fundamental nature of reality. For Thomas, the most basic distinction in all of reality is not between mind and matter, or between physical and spiritual, but between essence and existence. The essence of something tells us what kind of thing it is, its definition, nature, or whatness. The existence of something is simply the fact that it is, its isness, or actuality. This distinction might seem obvious, but Thomas realized it contains profound implications for understanding everything from God to material objects to human consciousness. Consider again the chair. Its essence includes being a piece of furniture designed to support a sitting person, having a seat, legs, and perhaps a back. But notice something crucial. You can understand this essence completely without any particular chair existing. You can grasp the concept of chairness even if all chairs were suddenly eliminated from the universe. This reveals something fundamental. In created things, essence and existence are distinct. Their essence doesn't guarantee their existence. Thomas saw that in everything we encounter, from rocks to plants to animals to human beings, essence and existence are joined together but separable. Things come into being when their essence receives the act of existing, and they pass away when existence is withdrawn from their essence. This constant joining and separation of essence and existence explains the fundamental contingency and changeability of our world. But this insight led Thomas to a revolutionary conclusion. If in all created things, essence and existence are distinct, there must logically be a being in which they are identical, a being whose very essence is to exist. This being cannot not exist, because existence itself is its nature. This being, Thomas concluded, is what we call God. Unlike created things whose existence is received from another, God's existence is not received, but is identical with his essence. God doesn't have existence. God is existence itself, pure actuality with no unrealized potential. This understanding of God as ipsum esse subsistens, subsistent being itself, distinguishes Thomas's approach from many other philosophical conceptions of divinity. This isn't merely abstract speculation, but illuminates our everyday experience. It explains why everything we encounter is limited and changing, because in all created things, existence is distinct from and limited by essence. A rock exists, but only as a rock, not as a tree or a person. A human exists, but only within the limitations of human nature. Only in God is existence unlimited by a restricting essence, because God's essence is precisely to exist without limitation. This fundamental insight becomes the cornerstone of Thomas's entire philosophical system. It explains why everything depends on God for its being, not just at the moment of creation, but at every instant. Created things don't simply receive existence once and then continue on their own. They must be continuously sustained in existence by the source of all existence. Think of it like light from the sun. Objects don't receive light once and then remain illuminated when the sun sets. They are illuminated only as long as the sun continues to shine upon them. Similarly, created things exist only as long as God, the source of existence, continuously gives them being. This metaphysical framework transforms how we understand causality. For Thomas, God is not just the first cause in a temporal sequence stretching back to the beginning of time. Rather, God is the ever-present, sustaining cause of existence at every moment. God doesn't merely wind up the universe and let it run. God actively upholds everything in existence from moment to moment. Such understanding reveals the profound contingency of everything we encounter. Nothing in our experience exists necessarily. It all might not have existed. This contingency points beyond itself to the necessary existence that grounds all contingent reality. As Thomas argues, if everything could not be, then at some point, nothing would be, and consequently, nothing would come to be. The fact that anything exists at all demands a source of existence that exists by necessity. Thomas's metaphysics goes beyond abstract considerations about being to provide a framework for understanding the rich diversity of the created world. While God is absolutely simple, with no distinction between essence and existence, or between different attributes, created things manifest beautiful complexity and hierarchy of being. Thomas envisioned reality as a great chain of being, stretching from inanimate matter at its lowest level, through plants and animals, to human beings who uniquely combine material and spiritual dimensions, and finally, to purely spiritual beings like angels, all grounded in the infinite being of God. Each level incorporates the perfections of those below it, while adding new capacities. This hierarchical vision isn't about assigning arbitrary value, but recognizing genuine differences in the kinds and degrees of being that things possess. Rocks exist, but only in the most basic sense. Plants exist and live. Animals exist, live, and sense. Humans exist, live, sense, and understand. Each level represents a fuller participation in being, a greater actualization of potential, a richer mode of existence. For Thomas, this hierarchy isn't static or oppressive, but dynamic and liberating. Each being fulfills its nature by actualizing its unique potential. A plant flourishes by growing toward the sun, an animal by successfully navigating its environment through sensation and instinct, a human by developing intellectual understanding and moral virtue. Everything has its proper place and purpose within the whole. Moreover, Thomas's metaphysics reveals the fundamental intelligibility of reality. Because everything comes from an intelligent creator, everything bears the marks of rationality in its very being. The order, proportion, and harmony we discover in the universe aren't human constructs imposed on chaos, but real features of a creation that flows from divine wisdom. This conviction that reality is fundamentally intelligible grounds Thomas's confidence in human reason's ability to understand the world. When we grasp the essence of something through intellectual understanding, we're not imposing arbitrary categories, but recognizing real intelligible structures present in things themselves. Our concepts, when accurate, correspond to actual essences in reality. Part 2. How we know, the process of human understanding. How do we know anything at all? How does the mind grasp reality? Can we trust our senses, our reasoning, our intuitions? These questions about the nature and limits of human knowledge stand at the center of philosophy, and Thomas Aquinas' answers reveal remarkable confidence in human cognitive capacities while acknowledging their genuine limitations. Unlike philosophers who begin with skepticism about whether we can know external reality at all, Thomas starts with the fundamental conviction that human beings are naturally equipped to know the world. Our senses and intellect didn't evolve accidentally, but were designed specifically to grasp reality. As he puts it, the human intellect is naturally ordered to know reality. This natural confidence stems from Thomas's understanding of how knowledge works. For him, knowledge isn't primarily about constructing mental representations that may or may not correspond to external objects. Instead, knowledge involves the mind actually taking on the form or essence of what it knows, though in a different mode. When you know a tree, something of the tree's nature or essence exists in your mind, not materially as it exists in the actual tree, but immaterially as an intelligible form. Your knowledge is true precisely when this intelligible form in your mind corresponds to the actual form or essence of the tree in reality. Knowledge, in this view, is a kind of participation of the knower in the known. But how does this process work? Thomas developed a sophisticated account of how sensory experience leads to intellectual understanding. Unlike Plato, who distrusted the senses and located knowledge in recollection of eternal forms, Thomas insisted that all human knowledge begins with sensation. As he famously stated, nothing is in the intellect that was not first in the senses. The process starts with the external senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, receiving sensory forms from objects. These sensory impressions are integrated by what Thomas called the common sense, not common sense in the modern meaning, but an internal faculty that combines and distinguishes sensory data. The imagination then preserves these sensory images and can recall or recombine them even when the objects are no longer present. But sensory knowledge alone isn't enough for genuine understanding. A dog can see and hear a tree just as you can, but it cannot grasp the essence of treeness or formulate general principles about trees. For this higher level of knowledge, Thomas explains that the active intellect abstracts universal, intelligible forms from particular sensory images. Imagine seeing several individual triangles drawn on paper, different sizes, colors, orientations. From these particular experiences, your intellect abstracts the universal concept of triangle, a three-sided polygon whose angles sum to 180 degrees. This concept isn't particular to any individual triangle, but captures what makes any triangle a triangle. This process of abstraction doesn't distort reality, but reveals its deeper intelligible structure. When you grasp the essence of something through abstraction, you're not imposing arbitrary categories, but recognizing real natures present in things themselves. The universals in your mind, when accurately formed, correspond to the universal natures instantiated in particular objects. Thomas's approach offers a middle path between extreme realism, which treats universals as existing independently of particular things, and extreme nominalism, which treats universals as mere names with no basis in reality. For Thomas, universals exist in three modes: before things, in the divine mind; in things, as their formal principles; and after things, in human minds that abstract them from experience. This framework allows Thomas to affirm both the objective reality of the essences we know and the active role of the human mind in knowing them. Knowledge isn't passive reception of ready-made ideas, nor arbitrary construction of mental categories. It's the mind's active discovery of real, intelligible structures present in things themselves. However, Thomas recognized that human knowledge has genuine limitations. Unlike angels, who grasp essences directly through intuition, human beings must work gradually from sensory particulars toward intellectual understanding. We know material things more easily than immaterial realities. We understand principles before drawing conclusions. We learn simple concepts before mastering complex theories. These limitations don't invalidate knowledge, but reflect our nature as rational animals, beings who combine intellectual capacity with material embodiment. Our knowledge is neither purely sensory, like that of non-rational animals, nor purely intellectual like that of angels, but a unique integration of both dimensions appropriate to our hybrid nature. Most significantly, Thomas acknowledged that our natural knowledge of God is especially limited. We cannot know God's essence directly in this life, but can only reason to God's existence and certain attributes from created effects. As Thomas puts it, we know God primarily by knowing what God is not material, not changeable, not limited, rather than by knowing directly what God is. This admission of the limits of natural knowledge led Thomas to recognize the value of divine revelation. Some truths about God exceed what human reason alone can discover, not because these truths contradict reason, but because they surpass its natural reach. Revelation doesn't replace reason, but supplements it, providing knowledge that human beings need but cannot attain through their own efforts. Thomas's epistemological approach is striking for its balanced confidence. He avoids both naive realism, which ignores the active role of the mind in knowledge, and radical skepticism, which questions whether we can know external reality at all. He acknowledges genuine limitations in human knowledge, while maintaining that within those limitations, we can achieve genuine understanding of reality. This balanced approach emerges from Thomas's understanding of human nature itself. As beings who are simultaneously physical and spiritual, material and intellectual, our knowledge necessarily reflects this composite nature. We know through both sensation and abstraction, through both empirical observation and rational reflection. Neither dimension alone is sufficient. Both must work together in the integrated act of human understanding. Perhaps most remarkably, Thomas saw knowledge not as a purely theoretical achievement, but as inherently oriented toward love. The intellect grasps truth, but this understanding naturally awakens the will's desire for the good that truth reveals. Knowledge and love work together in the human person, with each supporting and enhancing the other. As Thomas puts it, love follows knowledge. We cannot love what we do not in some way know, but knowledge itself reaches completion only when it awakens appropriate love. This integration of knowing and loving stands at the heart of Thomas's vision of human fulfillment, which culminates not in abstract theorizing, but in the direct knowledge and love of God. Part 3. The human person, unity of body and soul. What does it mean to be human? Are we primarily rational minds using physical bodies as instruments? Are we essentially sophisticated animals whose consciousness is merely an evolutionary development of basic instincts? Thomas Aquinas offers a vision of human nature that transcends these alternatives, presenting the human person as a profound unity of material and spiritual dimensions. For Thomas, human beings occupy a unique position in the cosmos, the highest of material creatures and the lowest of intellectual beings. We stand at the boundary between the material and spiritual worlds, incorporating elements of both in our single nature. This isn't a flaw or accident, but precisely what makes human existence both challenging and beautiful. Thomas describes the human person as rational animal, a definition that captures both our continuity with other living beings and our distinctive rational capacity. We share with plants the powers of nutrition, growth, and reproduction. We share with animals the capacities for sensation, movement, and appetite. But uniquely among earthly creatures, we possess intellectual understanding and free will. What makes Thomas's approach revolutionary is how he understands the relationship between these material and spiritual dimensions. Unlike Plato and later Descartes, who tended to see the body and soul as separate substances awkwardly joined together, Thomas insisted on their profound unity. The soul is not a ghost operating a machine, but the very principle that makes the body a living human body in the first place. Thomas describes the soul as the form of the body, not form in the sense of external shape, but as the organizing principle that makes matter into a specific kind of living thing. Just as the form of a statue organizes bronze into a specific configuration, the human soul organizes matter into a living, sensing, thinking human being. This means the relationship between soul and body isn't accidental or extrinsic, but essential and intrinsic. The soul is naturally oriented to inform a body, and the body is naturally disposed to be animated by the soul. Neither is complete without the other. As Thomas puts it, it is natural for the soul to be united to the body, and separation from the body is contrary to the nature of the soul. This profound unity means that human activities are never purely physical or purely spiritual, but always involve the whole person. When you think about abstract mathematics, it's not just your disembodied mind at work. Your brain's physical structures and processes are essentially involved. When you feel hunger or thirst, it's not just your body sending signals. Your consciousness interprets these sensations as meaningful experiences. Yet Thomas also recognized that intellectual understanding and free choice transcend purely material explanation. While rooted in sensory experience, human thinking grasps universal concepts and principles that go beyond particular material conditions. While influenced by bodily appetites and emotions, free will enables genuine self-determination that transcends deterministic causation. This capacity for intellectual understanding and free choice gives human beings unique dignity among material creatures. Animals act from instinct and conditioning, responding automatically to sensory stimuli. Humans can reflect on their own thoughts, evaluate their desires, and freely choose their actions based on rational judgment. This self-reflective capacity enables moral responsibility that other animals simply don't possess. But Thomas was equally clear that our embodied nature is not something to escape or overcome, but an essential aspect of being human. Unlike angels, who understand through direct intuition, humans naturally learn through sensory experience and gradual abstraction. Unlike purely spiritual beings, we properly express our thoughts and feelings through bodily gestures, facial expressions, and verbal communication. This integrated vision of human nature has profound implications for how we understand human flourishing. For Thomas, the good life isn't about suppressing bodily desires in favor of pure rationality, nor about indulging physical appetites without rational guidance. Rather, true fulfillment comes through the harmonious integration of all human dimensions under the guidance of reason and virtue. Physical pleasures like food, drink, and sex are genuine goods when enjoyed in accordance with reason. Emotions like anger, fear, and joy are not obstacles to virtue, but valuable aspects of human experience that should be educated rather than suppressed. Intellectual pursuits are most meaningful when connected to practical wisdom rather than divorced from real-life concerns. Thomas's balanced anthropology also illuminates his understanding of human sociality. We are not self-sufficient individuals who enter social relationships only for convenience or mutual advantage. Our very nature as embodied rational beings makes us inherently social, dependent on others for physical needs, emotional support, intellectual development, and moral growth. As Thomas explains, man is by nature a social animal, and one who lives in society still more than other animals. This is evident from the natural necessity of the case. Unlike other social animals who associate primarily for survival and reproduction, human sociality extends to friendship, intellectual exchange, moral formation, and shared worship. Even our capacity for language reveals our inherently social nature. Thomas notes that other animals communicate simple signals about immediate needs or dangers, but only humans develop complex language systems that enable sharing of abstract concepts, moral principles, cultural traditions, and spiritual insights. This linguistic capacity both reflects and enables the distinctive kind of community that humans naturally form. Perhaps most significantly, Thomas's anthropology explains why human beings naturally seek answers to existential questions about meaning and purpose. Because we possess intellect and will that transcend material conditions, we naturally wonder about ultimate causes and final ends. We're not satisfied with understanding how things work. We want to know why they exist at all and what purpose they serve. This natural orientation toward ultimate questions isn't an evolutionary accident or cultural construction, but reflects our fundamental nature as beings who straddle the material and spiritual realms. We're material enough to be fascinated by the physical world, yet spiritual enough to seek meaning beyond physical processes. We're animal enough to share basic biological drives, yet rational enough to evaluate and direct those drives toward higher goods. Thomas describes this dynamic tension as a hierarchy of desires, all ultimately oriented toward complete fulfillment. At the most basic level, we share with all beings the desire for self-preservation. With animals, we share desires for sensory pleasure, avoidance of pain, and reproduction. As rational beings, we uniquely desire knowledge of truth and love of goodness. But Thomas recognized that none of these limited goods can provide complete human fulfillment. Material possessions, physical pleasures, social status, and even intellectual achievements all leave the deepest human longing unsatisfied. This is not because these things aren't genuine goods, but because the human intellect and will are oriented toward unlimited truth and goodness that no limited good can provide. This natural desire for unlimited fulfillment points toward what Thomas considered the ultimate human purpose: union with God, the infinite source of all truth and goodness. This doesn't diminish the value of natural human activities, but places them within a larger framework that reveals their deeper significance. Part 4. The moral life, virtue, and natural law. What makes an action good or bad? How do we determine what we ought to do? Thomas Aquinas' ethical vision moves beyond mere rule-following to offer a rich account of human flourishing based on virtue and natural law. His approach avoids both rigid legalism that reduces morality to external compliance and relativism that makes ethical judgments merely subjective or cultural. At the heart of Thomas's ethics lies a fundamental insight. Actions are good or bad, primarily based on whether they contribute to authentic human fulfillment. As he puts it, good is what all things desire. Not in the sense that whatever anyone wants is automatically good, but that the genuine good is what fulfills the natural desires proper to each kind of being. For human beings specifically, the good life isn't arbitrary or conventional, but corresponds to our nature as rational animals with particular capacities and needs. Just as a good knife is one that cuts well, fulfilling its purpose, a good human life is one that actualizes the distinctive potentials of human nature. This teleological approach grounds ethics in a vision of human flourishing rather than arbitrary divine commands or social conventions. Thomas identified several basic goods that correspond to fundamental human inclinations. We naturally seek self-preservation and health. We naturally desire to reproduce and care for offspring. We naturally pursue knowledge, especially about ultimate causes. We naturally form social bonds and communities. We naturally seek to understand our relationship to the divine source of existence. These natural inclinations aren't simply brute facts about human psychology, but reveal the structure of human fulfillment designed by the divine creator. As Thomas explains, the natural law is nothing else than the rational creature's participation in the eternal law. The divine wisdom that orders all creation toward its proper end. This doesn't mean we can simply read off moral rules from observing human behavior. Natural inclinations must be interpreted through reason, integrated into a coherent whole, and directed toward truly human fulfillment rather than merely animal satisfaction. The natural law isn't biological determinism, but rational discernment of the goods that constitute authentic human flourishing. What distinguishes Thomas's approach from mere consequentialism is his insistence that not only the goals we pursue, but how we pursue them matters morally. Some actions are inherently incompatible with respect for basic human goods, regardless of the consequences they might produce. For Thomas, the end does not justify means that directly violate fundamental human goods like life, knowledge, or justice. This leads to Thomas's famous principle of double effect, which addresses situations where an action produces both good and bad consequences. An action with harmful side effects may be permissible if, or 1, the action itself isn't inherently wrong. 2, the agent intends the good effect rather than the bad one. 3, the good effect doesn't occur through the bad effect. And 4, the good achieved is proportionate to the harm permitted. But Thomas recognized that abstract principles alone don't provide sufficient guidance for the complexities of moral life. This is why virtue, the stable disposition to think, feel, and act well, plays a central role in his ethical vision. Virtues aren't just means to external rewards, but constitutive elements of human flourishing itself. The virtuous person doesn't merely do the right things, but becomes the kind of person who sees, desires, and acts rightly. Thomas adopted the classical cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, courage, and temperance, while giving them distinctively Christian interpretations. Prudence, practical wisdom, enables sound judgment about what to do in particular circumstances. Justice governs our relationships with others, giving each person what is due. Courage enables us to face difficulties and dangers appropriately. Temperance moderates our attraction to pleasurable goods. These acquired virtues, developed through practice and habituation, are complemented by the theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity, which are infused by divine grace rather than achieved through human effort alone. The theological virtues orient human beings toward supernatural fulfillment in direct relationship with God, perfecting rather than replacing the natural virtues. What makes Thomas's virtue ethics especially rich is how it integrates emotional life into moral development. Unlike Stoics, who tended to view emotions as irrational disturbances to be eliminated, Thomas saw properly formed emotions as valuable components of virtuous character. The courageous person doesn't feel no fear, but feels appropriate fear and acts rightly despite it. The temperate person doesn't lack desire for pleasure, but desires it in accordance with reason. This integration of emotion and reason appears especially in Thomas's treatment of love, which he describes as the fundamental motive force of all human action. Every choice, he argues, stems ultimately from love for some perceived good. Even apparently selfish or destructive actions involve distorted love. Loving lesser goods more than greater ones, loving partial goods as if they were complete, or loving in ways incompatible with the real nature of what is loved. Thomas distinguished several types of love, each with its proper place in human life. There is the natural love of self that underlies self-preservation and self-development. There is the attraction to sensory pleasures shared with animals. There is friendship based on mutual benefit or shared enjoyment. But highest of all is the love of benevolence or charity that seeks the genuine good of others for their own sake. This highest form of love doesn't compete with self-love, but completes it. As Thomas explains, friendship toward another arises from friendship toward oneself, not in the sense that all love is ultimately selfish, but that properly ordered self-love provides the model and foundation for loving others well. When I truly understand my own good as a rational being, I recognize the same good in others and love them accordingly. Thomas's account of conscience reveals another distinctive aspect of his ethics. Conscience isn't an independent moral faculty that competes with reason, but the application of moral knowledge to particular situations. It includes both synderesis, the habitual awareness of basic moral principles, and conscientia, the judgment about what should be done in specific circumstances. This means conscience can err when based on false information or faulty reasoning. Yet Thomas insisted that even an objectively mistaken conscience binds subjectively. One must follow conscience while simultaneously seeking to form it correctly. This balanced approach respects both the authority of personal conscience and the objective moral truth that conscience seeks to discern. What emerges from Thomas's ethical framework is a vision of moral development as a journey rather than a set of discrete decisions. The goal isn't just to make correct choices in isolated moments, but to become the kind of person who consistently perceives, desires, and acts well. This happens gradually through education, practice, community support, and ultimately divine grace that heals and elevates human capacities. The law plays an important but limited role in this developmental process. As Thomas explains, law properly aims at making citizens good, not merely at maintaining external order. Yet he recognized that law can directly address only external actions, not internal dispositions, and should prohibit primarily serious vices that harm others rather than attempting to mandate all virtues. This realistic approach to law reflects Thomas's understanding of how moral formation actually works. External rules and sanctions have legitimate but limited effectiveness in shaping character. More fundamental are the internal habits developed through repeated actions, the examples provided by virtuous role models, and the communities that embody and transmit moral wisdom. Part 5. Politics and the Common Good. How should human beings organize their collective life What makes political authority legitimate? What purpose should law serve in human communities? Thomas Aquinas addressed these questions with remarkable balance, avoiding both naive utopianism and cynical realism, while developing principles that remain relevant to contemporary political challenges. Unlike modern political theorists, who often begin with hypothetical social contracts among autonomous individuals, Thomas grounded his political philosophy in a vision of human beings as naturally social creatures. We are not self-sufficient individuals who choose to enter society for convenience, but beings whose very nature requires community for proper development and flourishing. Man is by nature a political animal, Thomas affirmed, following Aristotle. This natural sociability isn't limited to biological necessity or economic advantage, but extends to intellectual, moral, and spiritual development. We need others not just to survive, but to become fully human through language acquisition, moral formation, cultural participation, and shared pursuit of truth. This perspective transforms how we understand the purpose of political community. For Thomas, the state exists primarily to promote the common good, not just material prosperity or individual rights, but the shared conditions that enable all members of society to develop their potential and live virtuously. As he explains, the whole point of law and public office is the common good of those to whom it applies. The common good includes material conditions like peace, security, and economic sufficiency. It includes social conditions like justice in relationships, protection of families, and support for the vulnerable. It includes cultural conditions like education, arts, and religious practice. Most fundamentally, it includes the moral and spiritual development of citizens as rational beings, oriented toward ultimate truth and goodness. This comprehensive vision avoids reducing politics to mere economic management or procedural justice. For Thomas, political community serves human fulfillment in all its dimensions: physical, intellectual, moral, and spiritual. The best political arrangement is one that most effectively promotes integral human development through both institutional structures and cultural practices. But Thomas was no utopian dreamer. He recognized the profound effects of human sinfulness on political life and the need for realistic constraints on political power. While the purpose of government is the common good, rulers often pursue private advantage or partisan interests instead. This reality necessitates constitutional arrangements that distribute and limit power rather than concentrating it absolutely. Thomas distinguished between different forms of government: monarchy, rule by one; aristocracy, rule by a few; and polity, rule by many, with each having potential advantages and disadvantages. He generally favored a mixed constitution combining elements of all three, with monarchical leadership for unity, aristocratic wisdom for good counsel, and popular participation for consent and stability. What makes political authority legitimate? For Thomas, authority ultimately derives from God as the source of all created order. But this doesn't imply theocracy or divine right monarchy. Divine authority is mediated through natural law, the rational creature's participation in eternal law, and requires proper orientation toward the common good. Rulers who systematically violate natural law or deliberately harm the common good lose their moral authority to govern. This balanced approach avoids both absolutism that places rulers beyond accountability and revolutionism that treats all authority as inherently oppressive. Thomas recognized that political authority is both necessary for human flourishing and constantly tempted to corruption, requiring both respect for legitimate governance and vigilance against its abuse. Law plays a central role in Thomas's political vision. Unlike legal positivists who see law merely as the command of the sovereign, Thomas defined law as an ordinance of reason for the common good, promulgated by the one who has care of the community. This definition contains several crucial elements. Law must be reasonable rather than arbitrary, oriented toward common good rather than private advantage, and properly promulgated rather than secretly imposed. Thomas distinguished 4 types of law: eternal law, the divine wisdom governing the universe; natural law, the rational creature's participation in eternal law; human law, particular applications of natural law to specific circumstances; and divine law, additional guidance revealed by God for supernatural ends. Each type serves a proper purpose within its domain while maintaining inherent connections to the others. Human law derives its moral force from natural law, but cannot simply reproduce it. Lawmakers must translate general principles of natural justice into specific regulations appropriate to particular communities, considering local conditions, cultural traditions, and practical feasibility. This requires what Thomas called prudentia politica, political wisdom that applies universal principles to concrete situations. This approach balances universal moral norms with legitimate cultural diversity. Some principles of justice apply everywhere. Prohibitions on murder, theft, and perjury, for instance, because they protect fundamental human goods essential to any community. Other legal arrangements vary appropriately between different societies based on history, geography, economic development, and cultural values. Thomas was particularly insightful about the limits of law in promoting virtue. While he believed law should aim at making citizens good, he recognized that law can directly regulate only external actions, not internal dispositions. Moreover, law should prohibit primarily the most serious vices that harm others, not attempt to mandate all virtues or prohibit all vices. As he explains, human law does not prescribe all the acts of all the virtues, but only those that can be ordered to the common good, either immediately, like acts directly serving public welfare, or mediately, like acts well ordered to good citizenship. This realistic approach acknowledges both the legitimate moral purpose of law and its practical limitations in shaping character. Thomas also recognized that changing established laws should be approached cautiously, even when improvements seem possible. Legal stability provides social predictability that itself contributes to the common good. When laws are frequently changed, respect for law itself may diminish, causing greater harm than the imperfections in existing legislation. This conservative procedural principle coexists with progressive, substantive commitments to justice and human dignity. Private property occupies a particularly interesting position in Thomas's political thought. Unlike some Christian thinkers who viewed private ownership as a concession to human sinfulness, Thomas defended it as appropriate to human nature, arguing that people tend to care more diligently for what they own individually, manage their own affairs more orderly than common resources, and maintain greater social peace when property boundaries are clearly defined. Yet he simultaneously maintained that the purpose of property is to serve human needs, not to accumulate wealth for its own sake. While ownership rights are legitimate, they remain subordinate to the universal destination of goods, the principle that material resources should ultimately serve the needs of all. As Thomas states, in cases of need, all things become common property. This balanced approach avoids both collectivism that denies legitimate private rights and individualism that treats property as absolute. For Thomas, ownership entails stewardship, the responsibility to use resources for genuine human flourishing rather than merely for personal advantage or status competition. Part 6. Beauty and the Transcendentals. When was the last time you were stopped in your tracks by something beautiful? Perhaps it was a breathtaking landscape, a powerful piece of music, a perfectly crafted poem, or the grace of human kindness. Thomas Aquinas would recognize these experiences not as subjective preferences or evolutionary accidents, but as encounters with a fundamental property of being itself, beauty as one of the transcendentals that characterize all existence. For Thomas, beauty belongs to a special category of concepts that transcend particular types of being and apply universally to everything that exists. These transcendentals, being, unity, truth, goodness, and beauty, are different aspects of the same reality viewed from different perspectives. Each thing, insofar as it exists at all, necessarily possesses these transcendental properties in some measure. This means beauty isn't just a subjective feeling or cultural convention, but an objective feature of reality that human minds are naturally equipped to recognize. As Thomas explains, beauty relates to the cognitive faculty. It pleases when seen. When we experience authentic beauty, we're not projecting our preferences onto neutral objects, but recognizing a genuine quality present in things themselves. What makes something beautiful? Thomas identified 3 essential requirements: integrity or completeness, integritas, due proportion or harmony, consonantia, and clarity or radiance, claritas. These elements work together to create the experience of beauty, though different types of beautiful things might emphasize different aspects. Integrity means that something has all the parts appropriate to its nature, with nothing essential missing and nothing superfluous added. A beautiful melody has all the notes it should have, arranged in the right sequence. A beautiful face has all its features properly formed and related to each other. Beauty requires wholeness that satisfies the mind's desire for completion. Proportion involves the harmonious relationship between parts, creating a unified whole rather than a mere collection of elements. This doesn't mean rigid symmetry or mathematical precision, but the right relationship appropriate to each thing's nature. The proportions that make a cathedral beautiful differ from those that make a flower or a sonata beautiful. Yet each manifests the harmony appropriate to its kind. Clarity refers to the luminosity or radiance that allows the form or essence of something to shine through its material manifestation. This quality makes the intelligible structure of something immediately apparent to perception. When we call something brilliant or radiant, we're recognizing how its essence is clearly manifested in sensible form. These 3 elements work together in our experience of beauty. When we encounter something with integrity, proper proportion, and clarity, we experience an immediate pleasure that Thomas calls disinterested, not because we're uninterested in beauty, but because we appreciate it for its own sake rather than for practical utility. Beautiful things delight us simply by being what they are and allowing us to know them as such. But beauty isn't limited to sensory experiences. Thomas recognized intellectual beauty in mathematical proofs, philosophical arguments, and scientific theories. There's moral beauty in virtuous actions and characters. There's spiritual beauty in prayer, worship, and mystical experience. Each manifests the same fundamental qualities of integrity, proportion, and clarity appropriate to its particular domain. What makes Thomas's understanding of beauty especially profound is how he connects it with the other transcendentals. Beauty is the splendor of truth, the radiance that makes truth immediately appealing to the intellect. Beauty is the attractive aspect of the good, the quality that draws the will toward goodness even before deliberate choice. Beauty thus creates a bridge between knowing and loving, between intellectual apprehension and volitional commitment. This connection explains why aesthetic experience often feels transformative. When we encounter authentic beauty, we don't merely register pleasant sensations. We're drawn towards something beyond ourselves. Beauty awakens desire without possessiveness, appreciation without consumption, love without self-interest. It offers a foretaste of the kind of knowing and loving that constitutes ultimate human fulfillment. For Thomas, beauty ultimately points toward its divine source. If created things manifest beauty through integrity, proportion, and clarity, then the Creator of all things must possess these qualities in the highest degree. God is perfect integrity, complete wholeness without defect, perfect proportion, the harmony of all divine attributes, and perfect clarity, pure intelligibility as truth itself. Created beauty participates in and reflects divine beauty, though always in limited and partial ways. This doesn't mean Thomas reduced aesthetic appreciation to religious experience. He recognized the legitimate autonomy of different domains of beauty: artistic, natural, intellectual, moral, spiritual, each with its own proper standards and expressions. Yet he saw all these domains as interconnected, sharing common principles while manifesting them in distinct ways. Thomas's aesthetic suggests a particular approach to artistic creation and appreciation. Artists don't impose arbitrary forms on passive material, but discover and express forms already latent in reality. The best art reveals something true about its subject while presenting it in a way that delights the senses and awakens the mind. Artistic creation thus participates in divine creativity rather than competing with it. This understanding transforms how we experience beauty in everyday life. The play of light on water, the graceful movement of an animal, the subtle variations in a familiar landscape, all become occasions for recognizing the intelligible structure of reality manifesting itself to human perception. Even ordinary objects reveal beauty when viewed with attentive awareness of their integrity, proportion, and clarity. Perhaps most significantly, Thomas's aesthetics illuminates the relationship between beauty and love. Beauty awakens love by making goodness immediately appealing to the senses and imagination. When we perceive something as beautiful, we naturally want to behold it, protect it, share it with others, responses that correspond to the fundamental movements of love. Beauty thus serves as a kind of visual teacher of love, training us to value things for what they are, rather than merely for what they can do for us. Part 7. Speaking about the infinite. Analogical language and divine discourse. How can finite human minds speak meaningfully about an infinite God? How can language developed to describe created things apply to the uncreated source of all existence? These questions about religious language stand at the heart of theology, and Thomas Aquinas' answer, the theory of analogy, represents one of his most original and enduring contributions to philosophical and religious thought. The challenge arises from two seemingly contradictory truths. On one hand, God transcends all human categories and concepts. As the source of existence itself, God cannot be classified as simply another being alongside created things. On the other hand, religious traditions claim to speak truthfully about God using ordinary human language, calling God good, wise, loving, powerful, and just. How can both these claims be true? Thomas navigated this dilemma by developing a sophisticated theory of analogical language. Between univocal terms, used with exactly the same meaning, and equivocal terms, used with completely different meanings, he identified analogical terms that maintain a proportional relationship of similarity within difference. Consider the word good as applied to different beings. When we call both a knife and a person good, we're using the term analogically. A good knife cuts well, fulfilling its purpose as a knife. A good person lives virtuously, fulfilling the purpose of human nature. The meaning isn't identical, univocal, since human goodness involves moral qualities irrelevant to knives. But neither is it completely different, equivocal, since both meanings involve fulfillment of essential nature. Thomas applies this insight to divine predication. When we call both a person and God wise, we use the term analogically. Human wisdom involves reasoning from principles to conclusions through discursive thought. Divine wisdom knows all things perfectly in a single intuitive grasp. The meaning differs in mode and degree, yet maintains a genuine similarity that makes meaningful discourse possible. This analogical approach avoids both anthropomorphism that reduces God to human categories and agnosticism that claims we can say nothing meaningful about God at all. It maintains divine transcendence while allowing genuine knowledge of divine nature, though this knowledge remains limited and imperfect compared to its infinite object. As Thomas explains, whatever is said both of God and creatures is said in virtue of the order that creatures have to God as to their principle and cause, in whom all the perfections of things pre-exist excellently. Created perfections like goodness, wisdom, and love derive ultimately from God, who possesses these qualities in a higher and more perfect mode than creatures. We know God through these created reflections of divine perfection, though God always exceeds what these reflections reveal. The theory of analogy extends beyond theological discourse to illuminate the entire structure of reality. Thomas understood creation itself as analogical, not identical to God, which would be pantheism, nor completely unlike God, which would make creation unintelligible, but bearing a proportional similarity as effect to cause, as image to original, as participation to fullness. This understanding transforms how we approach the relationship between faith and reason, revelation and natural knowledge. Because created reality bears analogical similarity to its divine source, natural reason studying creation can achieve genuine, though limited, knowledge of God. Because human concepts can apply analogically to divine reality, revelation can communicate genuine truth through human language. Faith and reason, revelation and natural knowledge complement rather than contradict each other. Thomas distinguished three ways we speak about God: the way of causality, affirming God as the cause of created perfections; the way of negation, denying creaturely limitations in God; and the way of eminence, recognizing that divine perfections transcend created instances. All three work together in theological language. God is wise, causality, but not limited by human ignorance, negation, and possesses wisdom in a supereminent way beyond our comprehension, eminence. This analogical approach appears throughout Thomas's treatment of divine attributes. God's knowledge isn't discursive reasoning like human knowledge, but perfect intuitive understanding that knows all things in a single act. God's will isn't a faculty distinct from divine essence, as in humans, but identical with God's being, perfectly aligned with divine wisdom. God's love isn't an emotion or passion, as in human experience, but the pure act of willing good for creatures. Each divine attribute, properly understood, is identical with God's simple essence, distinguished only in our conceptual understanding rather than in reality itself. As Thomas explains, there is only one simple thing in God, but we speak of it in various ways because of the various relations it has to things outside God. The distinctions we make between divine wisdom, power, justice, and love reflect our limited understanding rather than actual composition in divine being. Part 8. Angels and the Hierarchy of Being. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to understand something instantly and completely without the gradual process of learning? To grasp mathematics, music, or metaphysics in a single intuitive flash, rather than through years of study? According to Thomas Aquinas, such immediate, intuitive understanding characterizes angelic intelligence, a mode of knowing profoundly different from human cognition, yet illuminating the unique position humans occupy in the cosmos. For Thomas, angels are not mythological embellishments or primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena, but real spiritual beings who occupy a crucial position in the hierarchy of existence between God and material creation. Studying angelic nature serves not merely religious devotion, but philosophical understanding of the complete spectrum of being, from pure matter to pure spirit. Thomas defines angels as intellectual substances entirely separate from matter. Unlike humans, who are embodied spirits requiring sensory experience and gradual abstraction to gain knowledge, angels are pure intelligences who know directly through intelligible forms received from God. As Thomas explains, angels understand without investigation or reasoning, for this is proper to human reason, as proceeding from one thing to another. This fundamental difference in cognitive operation produces several striking contrasts between angelic and human knowledge. Humans learn gradually, moving from principles to conclusions through logical steps. Angels grasp entire fields of knowledge immediately, seeing conclusions within principles without discursive reasoning. Humans depend on sensory experience as the starting point for abstraction. Angels receive intelligible species directly without requiring material input. Humans understand through universal concepts applied to particular instances. Angels comprehend particulars directly through intuitive insight. Thomas uses the metaphor of light to illustrate this distinction. As the sun illuminates corporeal things, God illuminates the angels. They see many things in one thing, especially in the Word, who is the perfect expression of all things. But man, being lower than the angel, acquires knowledge of truth from corporeal things themselves, requiring many mental images for understanding. This cognitive difference reflects the metaphysical structure of angelic being. Since angels lack matter, which in Thomistic philosophy serves as the principle of individuation within a species, Each individual angel constitutes its own species. As Thomas puts it, angels differ in species according to their different degrees of intellectual power. Unlike humans who share a common specific nature individuated by matter, each angel represents a unique degree of participation in intellectual being. This creates a vast hierarchy of angelic beings, ordered according to their proximity to divine perfection. Thomas adopted Pseudo-Dionysius's schema of 9 choirs arranged in 3 hierarchies: the highest, seraphim, cherubim, thrones, who contemplate God's essence, goodness, and providence; the middle, dominations, virtues, powers, who oversee universal governance; and the lowest, principalities, archangels, angels, who execute particular aspects of divine plan, including interactions with human beings. Each level in this hierarchy mediates divine illumination to those below it, creating what Thomas calls a cascade of intelligibility, from God through the various ranks of spiritual beings to the material universe. Higher angels possess more universal forms of knowledge that lower angels receive in more particular applications, just as a general principle contains implicitly the various specific cases it governs. But why did Thomas devote such careful attention to angelology? Far from mere theological speculation, his analysis of angelic intelligence serves several crucial philosophical purposes. First, it completes the great chain of being by filling the metaphysical space between God, pure act without limitation, and material creation, characterized by potentiality and change. Without spiritual creatures, there would be a gap in the plenum of existence that divine wisdom would not leave unfilled. Second, understanding angelic cognition illuminates human knowledge by contrast. By considering a mode of understanding that doesn't require sensory experience, abstraction, or discursive reasoning, we better appreciate both the limitations and unique capacities of human cognition. Angels know more perfectly than we do, but in a narrower way, while our embodied intelligence offers distinctive opportunities for discovery, creativity, and development over time. Third, angelic intelligence provides a model for understanding certain exceptional human experiences like mystical insight, creative inspiration, or intellectual intuition. While ordinary human knowledge proceeds discursively, we occasionally experience moments of immediate understanding that seem to transcend normal cognitive processes. Thomas would interpret these as limited participations in the angelic mode of knowing, temporary elevations of human intelligence toward more direct apprehension of truth. As Thomas explains, the human soul is on the horizon and boundary between spiritual and corporeal creatures, existing between eternity and time. Our intellectual soul shares with angels the capacity for universal understanding, self-reflection, and spiritual love, while our material body connects us with the physical universe through sensation, emotion, and organic processes. This integration of spirit and matter in a single nature constitutes both our distinctive dignity and our particular challenge. Part 9: Providence, Evil, and Human Freedom. How can an all-powerful, all-knowing, perfectly good God allow evil and suffering in the world? This question, often called the problem of evil, presents one of the greatest challenges to theistic belief. Thomas Aquinas addressed it not with simplistic dismissals, but with a sophisticated account of divine providence that respects both divine sovereignty and human freedom. Thomas begins with a fundamental conviction: God governs all creation with perfect wisdom and love. As the first cause of existence, God not only brings things into being, but directs them toward their proper ends. As Thomas explains, God is the cause of all things by his intellect and will, just as the artist is the cause of artifacts. But the artist brings his artifacts into existence according to the order of his wisdom and will. Therefore, God brings all things into existence in a certain order directed to an end. This governance extends to everything that exists, from the largest cosmic structures to the smallest subatomic particles, from natural processes to free choices. Nothing falls outside divine providence. No random events, no evolutionary developments, no human decisions. Everything that occurs does so under God's governance, either as directly willed or at least permitted for the sake of a greater good. But, and this is crucial, divine governance doesn't eliminate secondary causality or created autonomy. God doesn't override natural processes or human freedom, but works through them to accomplish divine purposes. As Thomas puts it, divine providence does not exclude intermediate causes, but rather establishes them. God governs lower beings through higher ones, material beings through spiritual ones, all according to the dignity of each nature. This means that created beings genuinely cause effects according to their proper natures. Gravity really attracts masses. Plants really grow through photosynthesis. Animals really follow instincts. Humans really make free choices. These secondary causes aren't illusions or mere appearances, but genuine participants in the causal order established by divine wisdom. Thomas uses the analogy of an archer shooting an arrow. The arrow's flight is simultaneously explained by both the archer's aim and the arrow's physical properties. The archer doesn't need to push the arrow at every moment of its flight. Once released, it follows its trajectory according to aerodynamic principles. Similarly, God doesn't need to intervene constantly in creation. Natural laws and created capacities, themselves established by divine wisdom, suffice to achieve most divine purposes. This understanding transforms how we view the relationship between divine causality and human freedom. God doesn't determine human choices by external force, but works through the very capacities that make us free beings. As Thomas explains, God moves all things according to their condition, natural things naturally, free things freely. Divine causality doesn't compete with human freedom, but establishes and supports it. This understanding helps address the problem of evil without diminishing either divine sovereignty or the genuine reality of evil. Thomas distinguished different kinds of evil, requiring different explanations. Physical evils, like natural disasters, diseases, and animal predation, result from the normal operation of natural laws that, while causing particular harms, enable greater goods like ecological balance, evolutionary development, and the regularity that makes science and technology possible. Moral evil, sin, presents a different challenge since it directly opposes God's will. Thomas explained that God does not will sin, but permits it for the sake of maintaining human freedom, which itself constitutes a greater good than its elimination would justify. As he puts it, God neither wills evil to be done, nor wills it not to be done, but wills to permit evil to be done. And this is good for the perfection of the universe. This permission isn't divine approval or indifference, but rather respect for the genuine freedom necessary for authentic love and virtue. Forced goodness wouldn't be genuine goodness at all. True love requires the possibility of rejection. Genuine virtue develops only through choices that could have been otherwise. By permitting moral evil, God respects the dignity of rational creatures, while finding ways to bring good from even the worst human choices. Part 10. Ultimate Fulfillment and the Beatific Vision. What constitutes perfect human happiness? What ultimate purpose gives meaning to our existence? Thomas Aquinas addressed these fundamental questions not with vague spiritual platitudes, but with philosophical precision and psychological insight, developing a vision of human fulfillment that integrates natural capacities with supernatural destiny. Thomas begins with a careful analysis of happiness, beatitudo, distinguishing between imperfect happiness possible in this life and perfect happiness that constitutes our ultimate end. Imperfect happiness involves developing virtues, acquiring knowledge, forming loving relationships, and participating in community, genuine goods that partially fulfill human nature but remain limited and temporary. No finite good, Thomas observed, can provide complete human fulfillment. Material possessions eventually disappoint. Sensory pleasures quickly fade. Fame proves empty. Power corrupts. Even intellectual achievements and moral virtues, while more enduring, cannot completely satisfy the restless human heart. As he explains, nothing finite can satisfy the infinite capacity of the intellect, which always desires to know more, or the unlimited desire of the will, which can never rest in any finite good. This analysis reflects profound psychological insight into human experience. We pursue particular goods, health, wealth, pleasure, knowledge, relationships, believing each will make us happy. Yet even when we achieve these goals, we find ourselves still wanting more, still searching for deeper fulfillment. Each attained good reveals its inadequacy to provide complete satisfaction, sending us looking for the next object that promises happiness. For Thomas, this endless striving isn't pathological frustration, but evidence of our orientation toward an infinite good. The very structure of human desire, always seeking more than any finite object can provide, points toward an ultimate fulfillment beyond limited goods. As Augustine famously expressed it, our hearts are restless until they rest in you. This leads to Thomas's understanding of perfect happiness, which consists in the direct intellectual vision of God's essence, what theologians call the beatific vision. Only in knowing ultimate truth and loving perfect goodness can the unlimited capacity of human intellect and will find complete satisfaction. As Thomas explains, final and perfect happiness can consist in nothing else than the vision of the divine essence. This direct vision differs fundamentally from our present knowledge of God through created effects or analogical concepts. In this life, we know God indirectly, recognizing divine existence and certain attributes from creation, but unable to grasp the divine essence directly. In the beatific vision, we know God face to face, seeing divine essence immediately without the mediation of concepts or images. Thomas was careful to maintain that this direct vision doesn't make humans equal to God or eliminate the infinite difference between creator and creature. The beatific vision is a supernatural gift that elevates human nature beyond its natural capacities without destroying or replacing them. As Thomas puts it, the natural desire to know can be satisfied only by seeing the essence of the first cause. But this exceeds the natural capacity of any created intellect. This supernatural fulfillment doesn't make natural goods meaningless, but reveals their deeper significance. The love of friendship, the pursuit of knowledge, the appreciation of beauty, the practice of virtue, All these natural human activities find their completion and perfect realization in the direct knowledge and love of God. Nothing genuinely human is lost in this ultimate fulfillment. Everything is perfected and transformed. Thomas's vision of human destiny provides a unique perspective on the meaning of earthly life. Our present existence is neither meaningless preparation for escape to another world, nor complete fulfillment in itself, but genuine participation in a journey toward perfect fulfillment. Every authentic human activity, work, family life, friendship, learning, creative expression, moral development, contributes to this ultimate purpose when properly ordered. This framework transforms how we understand suffering, failure, and limitation. These experiences, while genuinely painful and sometimes meaningless from a limited perspective, can serve as means of purification and growth that prepare us for perfect fulfillment. Thomas doesn't minimize earthly suffering, but places it within a cosmic context that reveals its potential significance. Conclusion: the enduring relevance of Thomistic wisdom. As we reach the end of our journey through the intellectual landscape of Thomas Aquinas, we find ourselves not at a destination, but at a vantage point from which to survey the remarkable coherence and continuing relevance of his philosophical vision. In an age often characterized by fragmentation, specialization, and intellectual isolation, Thomas offers something increasingly rare: a unified understanding of reality that integrates rather than divides, that seeks synthesis rather than merely analysis. What emerges from our exploration is a philosopher whose relevance extends far beyond the 13th century, or even the boundaries of religious thought. Thomas addressed the perennial questions that every thoughtful person encounters. What is real? How can we know? What does it mean to be human? How should we live? What gives life meaning? His answers, while developed within a particular historical context, speak to universal human concerns with remarkable insight and balance. Perhaps most striking is Thomas's confidence in human reason's capacity to understand reality while simultaneously acknowledging its genuine limitations. In our contemporary context, where skepticism about reason often alternates with naive scientism, Thomas offers a middle path that respects both the power and the proper boundaries of rational inquiry. He demonstrates how reason can achieve genuine knowledge of the world while recognizing domains that exceed its natural reach. Thomas's integration of faith and reason remains particularly relevant in addressing false dichotomies that plague contemporary discourse. He shows how religious belief can enhance rather than threaten intellectual inquiry, how scientific understanding can deepen rather than undermine appreciation for transcendent meaning, how natural knowledge can prepare for rather than compete with revealed truth. In an age when faith and reason are often seen as fundamentally opposed, Thomas demonstrates their essential compatibility. His understanding of human nature as a unity of material and spiritual dimensions offers crucial insights for contemporary debates about consciousness, artificial intelligence, and human enhancement. Against both materialistic reductionism that sees humans as merely complex machines and dualistic spiritualism that treats the body as accidental to human identity, Thomas presents an integrated anthropology that honors both our embodied existence and our transcendent capacities. Thomas's virtue ethics provides resources for addressing contemporary moral challenges without falling into either rigid legalism or cultural relativism. His understanding of natural law offers principles for cross-cultural moral dialogue while respecting legitimate diversity in their application. His integration of emotion and reason in moral development speaks to contemporary recognition that good decision-making involves the whole person, not just abstract rational calculation. His political philosophy, with its emphasis on the common good and subsidiarity, offers alternatives to both individualistic libertarianism and totalitarian collectivism. Thomas's understanding of legitimate authority, limited government, and the proper relationship between temporal and spiritual concerns provides frameworks for addressing contemporary questions about democracy, religious freedom, and social justice. Perhaps most importantly, Thomas offers a vision of reality as fundamentally meaningful and intelligible. In an age often characterized by nihilism, relativism, or existential anxiety, he presents a universe that makes sense, where human beings have genuine dignity and purpose, where suffering and evil don't have the final word, where intellectual inquiry and moral striving find their ultimate fulfillment in relationship with the source of all truth and goodness. This doesn't mean accepting Thomas's system uncritically or refusing to acknowledge where developments in science, philosophy, and theology require modifications of his positions. Like any great thinker, Thomas must be read in dialogue rather than mere repetition, with appreciation for both his enduring insights and his historical limitations. What we can learn from Thomas is not just particular conclusions, but an approach to thinking that seeks integration over fragmentation, synthesis over mere analysis, wisdom over mere information. His method of careful distinction, balanced judgment, and systematic integration offers a model for addressing contemporary questions with both intellectual rigor and practical wisdom. In our age of rapid change and increasing complexity, Thomas reminds us that the most fundamental questions remain constant across cultures and centuries. His confidence that these questions have meaningful answers, achievable through the disciplined use of human reason, open to truth from whatever source, offers hope for our own intellectual and spiritual journeys. Thomas Aquinas died in 1274 at the age of 49, leaving behind an intellectual legacy that continues to generate insight and debate more than 7 centuries later. Perhaps his greatest achievement was demonstrating how a single human mind, properly formed and faithfully employed, can achieve a vision of reality vast enough to encompass everything from the smallest material particles to the infinite mystery of divine existence. In studying Thomas, we encounter not just historical curiosity, but living wisdom that continues to illumine the path toward truth, goodness, and beauty, the transcendental properties of being that constitute the ultimate goals of human existence. His example reminds us that the life of the mind, properly ordered, is not escape from reality, but the deepest possible engagement with it, not retreat from practical concerns, but preparation for the most effective action in service of authentic human flourishing. The dumb ox that his fellow students once mocked has indeed produced such a bellowing that it will be heard throughout the world, not the noise of empty rhetoric, but the clear voice of reason seeking understanding, of faith-seeking knowledge, of human intelligence reaching toward the divine source of all truth. In a world hungry for wisdom, Thomas Aquinas remains a master teacher whose lessons have lost none of their power to enlighten, challenge, and inspire those willing to undertake the demanding but ultimately rewarding journey toward authentic understanding. His synthesis of Aristotelian philosophy with Christian theology created an intellectual framework robust enough to withstand centuries of criticism while remaining flexible enough to incorporate new insights. This achievement suggests that the deepest truths about reality, human nature, and ultimate meaning are not subject to the same kind of obsolescence that affects merely technical knowledge. The questions Thomas addressed and his fundamental approaches to answering them remain as relevant today as they were in the 13th century. As we conclude our exploration of this remarkable mind, we're left not with a finished system that forecloses further inquiry, but with an invitation to think more deeply, more systematically, and more humbly about the great questions that define human existence. Thomas Aquinas offers us not just answers, but better ways of asking questions, not just conclusions, but methods for reaching them, not just information, but wisdom for living. In an age that often confuses the accumulation of data with genuine understanding, such wisdom remains invaluable. The journey through Thomas's thought reveals a mind of extraordinary scope and penetration, but perhaps more importantly, it reveals a person whose intellectual achievements were inseparable from his commitment to truth, goodness, and the service of others. His example reminds us that the highest intellectual work is also moral work. The disciplined effort to understand reality as it truly is, rather than as we might prefer it to be, and to order our lives according to what we discover. This integration of intellectual and moral excellence, of rigorous thinking and humble seeking, of comprehensive system building and practical wisdom, makes Thomas Aquinas not just a great philosopher, but a model of what it means to be fully human. In studying his work, we encounter the remarkable achievements possible when human intelligence operates at its highest level, while remaining grounded in the conviction that truth, however difficult to attain, is both real and worth pursuing. The continuing vitality of Thomistic thought after more than 7 centuries testifies to its fundamental soundness and enduring relevance. While particular elements of his system may require revision in light of subsequent developments, his basic insights about the nature of reality, knowledge, human nature, ethics, and ultimate meaning continue to offer crucial guidance for contemporary seekers of wisdom. Thomas Aquinas stands as a permanent reminder that the human mind, despite its limitations, is capable of genuine insight into the deepest questions of existence. His confidence in reason's capacity to know truth, when properly employed and rightly ordered, offers an alternative to both skeptical despair and dogmatic presumption. His example shows us that intellectual humility and confidence in truth's accessibility are not contradictory, but complementary attitudes essential for authentic philosophical inquiry. In the end, Thomas Aquinas invites us not merely to admire his achievements, but to undertake our own journey toward understanding. His greatest legacy may be the demonstration that such a journey is possible, that the human intellect can indeed make progress toward wisdom, and that the pursuit of truth, however challenging and incomplete in this life, constitutes one of the highest and most rewarding of human activities. As we close this extended reflection on the angelic doctor, we might ask ourselves, what would it mean to approach our own questions with the same combination of intellectual rigor and humble openness that characterized Thomas's work? How might our contemporary challenges look different if viewed through the lens of his integrated wisdom? What kind of synthesis might emerge if we brought his methods to bear on the fragmented knowledge of our own age? These questions have no easy answers, but they point toward the continuing relevance of Thomas Aquinas for anyone seriously committed to the life of the mind in service of truth and human flourishing. His example reminds us that philosophy, at its best, is not merely academic exercise, but preparation for life, intellectual formation that enables us to think more clearly, choose more wisely, and live more fully in accordance with the deepest truths about reality and human nature. The medieval world that shaped Thomas Aquinas has long since passed away, but the questions he addressed and the intellectual virtues he exemplified remain as relevant as ever. In studying his work, we participate in the great conversation that constitutes the philosophical tradition at its best, a conversation that transcends historical periods and cultural boundaries in the shared pursuit of wisdom that constitutes one of the defining characteristics of human nature itself.